Yes, would you ask the witness to come back in, please? Thank you. Right, Mr. Anketell-Jones, ready to continue?
Yes.
Good, thank you very much. Yes, Ms. Grange.
Yes, thank you. Yes. Can we turn, so I'm staying with the story of the insulation and your contact with Celotex. Can we turn to a document CEL 409974? So this is from the Celotex Salesforce database, and it shows that you had what seems to be known as a contact profile within their database. Do you see that there? So it's got your name at the top. Do you see that?
Yes.
And details about your job and your role below that. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Were you aware that you were seen as a contact profile for Celotex at the time?
Not as a person, but as a company, I would have thought.
I see. Yeah, so Harley would, certainly in your mind, have been seen as a key contact for Celotex.
As a contact, yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever have any role in the marketing or promotion of Celotex products?
No.
Did Harley ever get involved in helping Celotex to market its range of products?
No.
Now, following on in the chronology, I now want to pick up where we are in January 2015. If we can look at CEL 6019. And I want to start on page 2 to an email that you send. There we go, at the bottom of that page. If we zoom in on the bottom, you send this email on the 16th of January 2015, and the subject is headed RS5000. It's to Jonathan Room at Celotex. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, we looked at this very briefly when we first started off your evidence, but I now want to ask you some more detail about it. So we can see there you say, good morning, John. Sorry, but got a headache for you. We are being asked by one of our clients to see the test results and certificates for the RS5000 insulation. They want to know exactly how it was installed when tested to BS 84142 2005, who carried out the testing, how it was fixed, what it was covered with, what cladding was used, what support structure, etc., and most importantly, the results. Drawings and or photos of the test setup would help show how it was installed, but I imagine these form part of the test results anyway. They also want to see the certificate and results for the test to BS 476 Part 7 fire class rating, showing the index rating achieved during the test. Could you sort this out for us, please? We are hoping to put this forward on most of the cladding jobs, so having this information to hand would be most useful. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, the first question is in relation to what project were you inquiring about? You say there in the second line, we are being asked by one of our clients to see the test results for the RS5000. Can you remember what project that was?
No, I mean, at the beginning of 2015, I started to help out more with the front end of the building, of the company with estimating. So it was probably to do with one of those projects that was being estimated.
Right. Are you able to help us as to whether it might have been the Grenfell project? I mean, we know that the Grenfell project was ongoing at this time, and we know that you had involvement in it. Could it have been Grenfell you were inquiring in relation to?
I would have thought it was more likely one of the jobs that was being estimated and trying to be won at that time.
And when you say one of our clients, what kind of body are we thinking of there? I mean, what does that say to you in terms of who was asking?
Probably would have come through either a main contractor or an architect.
Yeah. Now, if it was a different project, did you have any concerns that this or similar information was not being asked for by the professionals on the Grenfell project?
Would have, well, looking back on it, I would have expected that this had already been done on the Grenfell project.
And who would you have expected to have done that?
The architect and building control.
So not Harley?
No.
I see.
I would imagine that this was probably to do with one of the projects which had a performance specification rather than a prescriptive specification. So
Yeah.
it's probably that we were being asked to put forward a installation that would meet the U-value requirements.
We'll look at what happens, and you do get sent some information back from Mr. Room eventually. But can I just check, did you ever think at the time to refer this kind of information on to designers either in Harley or, say, Studio E at the time of the Grenfell project?
No, because looking back on it, I would have expected this work to have already been done. This was for a new project. I think that hadn't been done on yet.
Sorry, you say that this might have been somebody interested in U-values, but none of this is concerned with U-values, is it?
No, but this is the only reason that we'd be putting forward an insulation is because we were trying to hit a performance-related specification rather than a prescriptive one. If it was prescriptive, then it would be that this was already in that specification for that job.
But this is all about fire testing, isn't it? Fire testing of the RS 5000 insulation.
Yeah, so if there was a performance specification
Yeah.
that had a high performance requirement, we would have known that the only way we could probably achieve it was with one of these high performance insulations. And so we'd have to put this forward to that client to see if they believed it was compliant or not.
Isn't it more likely that one of your clients has realised that it's important to know the test results and details of the testing for the BS 8414 tests that were done on RS 5000?
I think that it's basically the same thing, that we were putting forward a product to meet a performance requirement, and they'd probably come back saying that they needed to see this information to be able to approve that product.
Yes, isn't it likely that they looked at the RS 5000 information following the launch of that product and realised that they needed to know more about exactly how it was installed, what it was covered with, what cladding was used, etc., in order to decide whether it might be suitable for another project?
I think we're saying the same thing, aren't we?
I'm not sure we are, but
I'm saying that we'd probably got a performance required specification in. We knew it was a high performance requirement, so we would have put this forward to them, and it would appear that they came back asking for additional information.
yeah.
But does that mean you would have put it forward without satisfying yourself that it met the fire safety requirements?
Again, because I wasn't educated in fire safety or had any training in it, I wouldn't have been able to do more than look over the information and pass it on to the people who did.
Did you think about reading the information that Jonathan Room had already sent you? We know you got that zip file in August 14 with all that pack of information, which would have answered some of these questions, wouldn't it? Like what cladding was used, support structure, etc., how it was fixed. Some of that was in the pack of information that we looked at this morning, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I wouldn't have, I wasn't trained in those areas. I wouldn't have known to look back at that because they didn't stand out to me in the same way as things like Eurocodes would.
Why did you say in the first line, sorry but got a headache for you? Why did you consider it would be a headache for Celotex to provide this information?
I can't remember.
If you didn't know this area and you didn't know even the basics about fire testing, how would you know that it would be difficult? Because that's what headache implies, doesn't it? Difficult. How would you know it would be difficult for Celotex to be providing this information?
I'd only be guessing at why I was saying that.
Were you aware at the time that there might be difficulties for Mr. Room in disclosing the documents?
I think looking back at his response to this, there must have been some sort of conversations at the time that betrayed that. But only from looking back at that, I have no memory of it.
If we look at what you say at the end of that first detailed paragraph, three paragraphs down, you say drawings and or photos of the test setup would help show how it was installed. But I imagine these form part of the test results anyway. Now, if you didn't know the basics about the fire testing, how could you be speculating here that you imagine that they do form part of the test results anyway?
Probably from speaking to the person who was asking for them.
I see. So you're saying you've got all of this and you're merely a conduit. Is that what you're saying, between the client that's asking and Celotex?
Yes.
Were you aware at the time, I want to put this to you directly, that just because Celotex had passed 18414 test, that did not mean that it would be suitable for all rain screen applications?
I was aware at the time that if it was accepted on one job, it wouldn't necessarily mean it was be accepted on another job. So it was done on a job-by-job basis. But I didn't understand what grounds that was on.
So you didn't understand that it was important to check the system that was proposed to be used and whether it was the same as the system that had been tested?
No, to be honest, I thought it just came down to the particular fire consultant or building control officer who was reviewing the information and how they interpreted it.
Were you aware that the Celotex was not compliant in certain circumstances, and that was why the provision of this information might be difficult for Mr. Room?
I wasn't aware that it wasn't compliant. I was just aware that some people might not accept it.
So you weren't aware that if following the guidance, the guidance in, say, paragraph 12.7 of ADB, that this product wouldn't meet the limited combustibility requirements? You weren't aware of that?
No.
So can you help us as to why it would be a headache for Jonathan Room to provide this information?
I can only draw an assumption based on his response to this email, where he says about it being unlikely that any information would be given for parts of it. And we must have had a conversation, well, I assume that we had a conversation along those lines at some point previously.
Did you anticipate that Celotex would be reluctant to disclose these documents?
I can't remember, but by that start and the response, I can guess that that must have been along those lines.
Would you agree that you must have known at the time that the precise details of the system tested was important? Otherwise, why be asking Celotex for these details?
Because I think I was passing on information. I wouldn't have known from my own knowledge, but I probably would have been told that it was important, and that was why to ask for it by the client.
I see. So you didn't ask yourself whether or not this was important enough to trouble Celotex with before you just passed on the information?
No, I just passed on the information.
I would suggest to you that on reading this email, it does suggest that you did appreciate how important the exact details of the system that had been tested were.
Yeah, because I was being asked by somebody who was being very specific in what they required.
Was it your understanding that the way in which the test was set up was critical to its reliability?
No. Only from what was being asked here, I could have drawn that conclusion, but I didn't know it.
Did this request from your client cause you to reconsider the suitability of Celotex RS 5000 for use on the Grenfell project?
No, because it was my understanding that these sort of checks had been already carried out by the architect and building control.
But you had no communications, did you, from Studio E or building control which said those checks had been carried out?
No, because I wasn't the designer on that project.
And did you know what the BS 476 Part 7 testing was relevant to?
No,
You didn't know that that might be relevant to National Class Naught?
no,
Did you know why that additional information might be relevant to the use of an insulation product?
no,
Now, finally, you say, we are hoping to put this forward on most of the cladding jobs, so having this information to hand would be most useful. Would you agree that that suggests that you did recognise at the time how important that information was likely to be? You say it would be most useful.
I knew that the U values for jobs were becoming more and more difficult to hit, and I knew that Celotex was offering a product that could be used over 18 metres and was a high performance insulation that could meet those requirements. And for the projects that were coming up, which were showing high performance requirements, the only way to satisfy them was to use a high performance insulation.
But this is nothing to do with U values, is it? It's to do with the fire performance of this insulation product.
Yeah, but the reason why it was going to be put forward on most cladding jobs was because it was able to satisfy those high performance requirements, and that on those jobs it would be the same process that we would go through on every project where you submitted the information to the design team for its approval. So if you actually had that on file, you'd be able to do it on every job.
Again, I would suggest to you that a more natural reading of this email is that you did appreciate that these kind of details were important to its compliance and its selection on cladding projects.
No, I think it is that it would be useful for getting it signed off on other projects.
Now, if we scroll up, we can see that Mr. Ream responds on the 19th of January at 10:57 immediately.
Ms. Green, can I just
Sorry, yeah.
ask you a question? You've spoken more than once about recommending high performance insulation products for other projects. Did you have any training or education in thermal performance or calculation of U values and so on?
No, I didn't. But I was able to carry out calculations to cross-check what had been put on there. And so you could quickly ascertain whether one insulation was going to meet those requirements or not.
But you didn't feel able to form views about fire performance?
No, because one is a very simple mathematical formula. The other one is a very complex set of regulations.
All right. Yes, thank you. Yes, Ms. Grange.
Yes, sorry. Before I go to Mr. Ream's response, just one further question. Why were you hoping to put RS 5000 forward on most of your cladding jobs? To what benefit?
For the reason I mentioned before, that the jobs that started to come in had very high performance requirements from the envelope, and most of the jobs that could only be achieved using a high performance insulation. And Celotex was saying that theirs was acceptable for use above 18 metres.
But if this information was going to be a headache for Mr. Room, why were you hoping to put that forward on all of your cladding projects?
I think from his reply, well, because he was saying that it could be used above 18 metres, it was the only one that would satisfy those U values and be acceptable for use over 18 metres.
Right. Now, if we scroll up and look now, we see his response is, "Morning, Dan. Hope you had a good weekend. I will check regarding test reports and what we are allowed to send out. I will get back to you soon." Do you see that there?
Yes.
Did it concern you that he might not be allowed to send out certain test reports relevant to the fire performance of this product?
No. At that time, my understanding of how test reports were written and what they showed was virtually none, because I was a structural engineer. And so I just assumed that there was some sort of privacy rules on it, but the information that he would be allowed to send would be enough to satisfy the consultants.
But were you not concerned that this was relevant to life safety, and therefore, if there was details that you needed to see, they ought to be provided? Was that not your attitude?
Yeah, I thought that they would be allowed to send out enough to satisfy those requirements and to give the consultants enough information to be able to sign them off. I wasn't worried that the stuff that he wasn't allowed to send would impede that in any way.
Right. And then we see your response to that at the bottom of page 1 and on to page 2. On the 20th of January 2015, and then if we go over to the top, you say, fingers crossed you can get this for us. I am worried that if this can't be cleared up, then we will have to change to Rockwool Duo Slab, as this has the necessary backup to appease the specialist. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, can you help us understand this comment? What do you mean that Rockwool Duo Slab had the necessary backup to appease the specialists?
That whatever we had submitted to the consultants had been approved for the Rockwool Duo Slab.
And did you understand that that would be about the fire performance of the Rockwool Duo Slab, that it had the necessary backup to appease the specialists?
It would be either that it could only really be it could be a range of things, but it would probably be the fire performance, the thermal performance, and whether it was suitable for behind a rain screen for its longevity and durability.
Well, I'd suggest to you it was almost certainly about the fire performance, because that was the sole topic of your email to Mr. Room, was fire performance.
Yeah.
So isn't it likely that the fire performance of the Rockwool Duo Slab had satisfied the specialists in that job, and you were needing more information from Celotex to persuade them that that RS5000 product was satisfactory from a fire safety perspective? Isn't that what was happening?
I think that the Rockwool Duo Slab, often takes up twice as much room as the high performance insulations, and if this job had been drawn with high performance, it would have meant going back and completely changing the design.
Would you agree with me that a natural reading of this is that you did understand at the time that Rockwool Duo Slab had the necessary backup in terms of fire performance to appease the specialists?
I wouldn't have known why they were happy with it, but I think I would have known that they were happy with it.
Why did you put the word specialist in inverted commas?
Because I think even then I was aware of how broadly people interpreted a lot of this information, and how on one job it might be accepted and on one job it might not.
Yeah.
And I think I found that being a structural engineer, it was always very black and white. There was no grey in being a structural engineer. I found it very hard to align myself with people who called themselves specialists but couldn't agree on something.
Right. Who are you referring to there? Are you referring to architects or fire engineers? Can you help us?
I would say architects, fire engineers, building control, thermal consultants.
Were you sceptical of their specialisms?
I think generally across the board I was.
Why? Why were you sceptical of them asking for this?
Because you couldn't ever get the same answer twice, it felt like.
Yeah.
You could be working in one part of London and they'd want it done one way, and you could be working in another part of London and they'd want it done in another way. I personally failed to see how that makes sense.
Did the specialist ever explain to you why this information was required and was necessary for them?
I can't remember. It would have been that they wanted to approve the product, or we wanted them to approve the product. I can't remember any conversations about it.
Did you know that the reason this information was being requested by the specialist was because 8414 tests applied only to the system as tested?
No, I did not know that.
So you didn't think that was why the specialists were seeking this information?
I just thought that they wanted all of the information that they could get to be able to sign it off.
So you've commented there that if the information can't be provided, Harley would have to change to rock wool duo slab. That's the phrase you've used. Then we will have to change to rock wool duo slab. Doesn't that suggest that you had positively suggested RS 5000 and it was being queried by specialists on a project?
I can't remember a time where we ever, started the requirements. Usually the architect knew roughly what he wanted, and he'd know that he wanted a high performance insulation or a rock wool insulation, and then we'd go away to come back with a proposal of which one.
So is your evidence that it was never Harley suggesting that RS 5000 was a suitable insulation product for buildings above 18 metres? Is that your evidence?
Yes.
Now, we can see from the email at the top of that page that on the 21st of January 2015, on the top of page 1, Mr. Room provided you with a number of things. He says this: "Hi Dan, I've attached the 12-page BS 8414 Part 2 report showing the build-up and components used. In addition, I'm sending you the thermocouple graphs showing the temperatures at each level of the test. I'm not able to send you the BS 476 test document as this is confidential. I would be surprised if you were able to get this or any other report from the manufacturer, to be honest. In lieu of this, I've attached the data sheet showing confirmation of the products having BS 476 Part 6 and 7, which gives it Class 0 performance in addition to the BS 8414 test. I would ask that these documents are not shared outside of the network of you and your specialist advisor for this project. Please give me a call when you have a moment to discuss." Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, did you read those documents when you were provided with them?
No.
You didn't. So you simply passed them on to to the specialists on the project.
Yeah, I just, at that point, I wouldn't have known what they're about. I just don't imagine that I would have read them.
So that didn't prompt you to look at those documents and then consider whether the RS 5000 product was suitable for use on Grenfell Tower?
No, because as far as I was concerned, Grenfell Tower, the insulation had already been specified and approved by the architect and building control.
Did you think that what you ought to do is send this information to other members of the Grenfell project, including Kevin Lamb, Studio E, Ryden, so that they were aware of it and could use it in making an assessment as to whether they should be using RS 5000? Did you think about that?
No, because I thought it had already been done.
Well, it hadn't, had it? This is January 2015.
Yeah, but as far as I was aware, the product was already specified well before I even looked at the first time I saw the NBS spec. It was what was in there, I think.
But it's not the same product as the NBS specification. We've looked at that. The product in the NBS specification was FR 5000. This is RS 5000, isn't it?
Yes.
So RS 5000 hadn't been specified long before, had it?
No, but it's just my recollection of it. I can't remember looking at this and having any thoughts as to whether there was any doubt by the design team as to the use of this on Grenfell. I was under the impression that it was already approved.
Does that mean that you kept this information to yourself within Harley? Did you share it with anybody else in Harley?
I don't know.
You don't know? Did it concern you that Mr. Room said he was unable to provide the BS 476 test document? We see that in the second paragraph where he says it's confidential. Did that concern you at all?
No, I would have sent this on, and if it had been a concern for the people who understood it, I would have gone back to him.
When he says confidential, what did you understand him to mean? Confidential to who?
At the time, I was under the impression that Celotex and Kingspan were sort of both competing to get a product that could be used over 18 metres. And I assumed that it was in relation to not letting them see how they were, what was their special way of meeting the requirement.
I see. So you think Mr. Room was concerned that you might pass this information on to Kingspan,
Yeah.
to Celotex's competitor?
Or that they may somehow get sight of it.
Did you ever clarify that with him and ask him, well, why is this confidential? Confidential to who? Did you ever ask that?
No, all I can remember is the conversations with him at the time about how they were the first one to get a high-performance insulation that could be used above 18 metres, and that Kingspan didn't have one.
Did this not sharing the 476 test document with you cause you to reconsider whether or not RS 5000 ought to be used at Grenfell?
No, I think if whoever I'd sent this on to, I suppose if they'd come back and said that it was an issue, it might have raised something, but I don't remember it causing any concern.
So are you saying when you got this email, you were 100% confident that RS 5000 was an appropriate insulation product to use on buildings above 18 metres?
I wasn't educated in that to be able to draw that conclusion, but I obviously sent this on to someone else to check whether it could be.
If you weren't educated in that, why was it you having these conversations with Mr. Room? Why was it you being the person to ask for this information?
I think because I'd moved over to help Mark Harris out with the estimating, it was just somebody to do it.
Did it concern you that at the end of the email he said that he's asking that these documents are not shared outside of the network of you and your specialist advisor for this project? Did that concern you, that you wouldn't be able to use that information for any other project where RS 5000 was specified?
No, it didn't. I thought this was just to do with the competition with Kingspan.
Did that not ring any alarm bells for you?
No.
And can you help us as to what you then did with this information when you received it?
I would imagine I passed it on to the client that was asking for it.
And that was all?
Yeah.
So then if we look at another email in this chain, this is CEL 6023. We can see at the bottom of page 1, on 21st of January at 9:09, you go back to Mr. Room. You say, "Morning, John, thanks for this. Sorry I didn't call back yesterday. We didn't finish till 6. I will look through it and try and give you a call back. Kind regards, Dan." Do you see that there?
Yes.
So that does suggest that you intended to look through these documents, not merely pass them on, doesn't it?
No, I think, honestly, I wouldn't have been able to look through them without that training and knowledge. So it would have been to look through it just to compare whether he'd sent what had been asked for and whether I could send it on or not.
I see. Well, I would suggest to you that a natural reading of this is that you were intending to look through it and look at what information you'd been provided with to make at least some assessment of it.
No, I wouldn't have been able to make an assessment. I had no training in this at all. So all I could have done is look through it and see if the information that had been asked for had been sent.
Do you know whether you called him back? You say, "I'll try and give you a call back." Do you remember calling him back?
No, I don't.
Or anything about your conversation?
No.
And we've checked, and we think the first order of RS 5000 insulation from Celotex through other suppliers like SIG is actually the 25th of March 2015. So after this. So it was not too late on Grenfell at this point. to notify people about this information, was it, if that's right?
But as far as I was aware, that had already been, signed off by the architect and building control on that project.
Okay. If we go forward in time, sticking with the installation and Mr. Room, we've already seen that he sent you the Building Control Alliance Technical Guidance Note 18 on the 8th of April 2015. Can we go back to that? CEL 403628. So this is April 2015. Mr. Room, to you. Hi Dan, thanks for your time today to get an update on projects and family. Let me know when you have time to go through the specs for Premier House. I've attached the building control guidance notes for installation products above 18 metres, which seem to be doing the rounds at the moment. If you do find that you are entering into conversations regarding this subject, please let me know what is being said and by whom. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And it would appear that this, again, followed a call with him, because he says, thanks for your time today to get an update. Or maybe you saw him in person. Can you recall how you'd had contact with him at that point? Did you discuss Technical Guidance Note 18 with him in that conversation, do you think?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? And I think you told us yesterday that you didn't read that Technical Guidance Note 18, is that right?
No, I wasn't familiar with it.
And he says, we've just seen, if you do find that you're entering into conversations regarding this subject, please let me know what's being said and by whom. Would you agree that reading that, he appears to be expecting that you might be entering into conversations about the subject? Do you see that?
Yes.
And is it possible that that's because that guidance made it clear that if the insulation wasn't limited combustibility, it shouldn't be used unless it followed alternative compliance routes?
That's a conclusion that you could draw now, but at the time I didn't understand or hadn't been trained in that to understand that.
Were you aware that there was something in that technical guidance note that Mr. Room was unhappy with?
No.
So why would he be saying to you, if you're entering into conversations regarding this subject, please let me know what's being said and by whom? Why was he so keen to know what was being said about that technical guidance note and by whom?
I'd only be guessing, I'm afraid. I don't know whether it would be something that he was positive within that building control guidance note or something that he was negative about in it.
Did you ever inform him about conversations you were aware of regarding this subject?
Not that I'm aware of.
And it would appear from his email that the documentation was doing the rounds, he says. It seems to be doing the rounds at the moment. Just to be clear, had you received that guidance document or heard about it from anybody else?
No, I think that it may well have been doing the rounds for people who were trained in that way and had an understanding of fire performance. But I certainly hadn't been aware of it doing the rounds.
Was there a continuing relationship between Mr. Room and Harley after this time?
I believe so, yes.
Between you and Mr. Room?
I believe he kept coming into the office. I don't remember it changing.
Was it the case that due to your relationship with Mr. Room, Harley promoted Celotex RS5000 as an appropriate product for use on Grenfell Tower?
No, I think it was my understanding that Celotex had already been specified on the project.
Was Harley proposing Celotex RS5000 on a number of other projects at this time?
I don't think we were proposing it on a number of projects. I think that a number of projects had high performance insulations on them, and we were trying to find products that could meet those requirements.
Did Harley ever receive any financial incentive to promote or propose RS 5000 for its projects?
I wouldn't have known or been involved in those kind of conversations.
Or any other form of incentive to be promoting Celotex?
No.
Can we go then to another email? This is CEL 408582. This is an email in relation to a different project. And it's going back in time, actually, to July 2013, from Mr. Room to you. And it's about ISIS House firebreak visit. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And he says, Dan, hope you had a lovely weekend. I've asked one of my colleagues to get in touch. I forgot to ask, who is our competition on the resin and rods for ISIS? Do you see that there?
Yep.
What's he referring to there?
That's a project called ISIS House.
And then at the end of that, he says, once I have the competitor info, I can review with my boss and raise a credit for the price difference that we settle upon. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So what's he referring to there?
We were buying resin and rods for that project, and he was offering to match their price.
Yeah. And Harley would receive that credit. Is that right? If you went with Celotex for those products?
No, this is not Celotex.
Oh, I beg your pardon. You're right. This is with it when he's with Hilti. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Sorry, I should correct that. This is when Jonathan Room is at the Hilti company. While we're with this email, can we look at the email below that, dated the 12th of July 2013 at 16:37 at the bottom of this page? This is your email to him about ISIS House firebreak visit. You say, John, Taff, Mark Osborne, needs some help on site with the installation of fire breaks to make sure it's being done right and discuss and resolve any problems he may be having. Can you just help us as to why? Is that Osborne Berry you're referring to there?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you ask us as to why they were needing help from Mr. Room when he was at Hilti with the installation of fire breaks on ISIS House?
I think it was always normal to get the supplier to visit site and check that the installation was being done correctly.
I see. Had you often asked Mr. Room for help with installation on site?
With structural issues, I asked him for site testing of fixings. I don't think he was necessarily the specialist for fire breaks. I think that there was somebody else in the business who would have been sent out for that.
Okay. Can we now turn to the SIG quotation for the Celotex RS 5000 for the Grenfell project? This is CEL 6035. So this is SIG. Can you just tell us who SIG were?
I only know them now, to be honest. I wasn't involved in...
They're suppliers of insulation, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we can see this is a quote from SIG for the attention of Ben Bailey, and it's dated the 17th of March 2015. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And what we can see when we look down this invoice is that there appears to be a discount of 47.5% in relation to the Celotex product. Celotex, the product is Celotex RS 5000 specials, quantity 660, price £132.19 per each, discount 47.5. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Would you agree that that was a hefty discount?
I wouldn't be able to comment on it because I wasn't buying those products.
So,
I wouldn't know if that was normal or abnormal.
So you weren't aware, is this your evidence that you weren't aware that on the Grenfell project you were getting a 47.5% discount on the Celotex RS 5000 insulation? You weren't aware of that?
No, I was not.
Were you aware you were getting any form of discount?
No.
So can you help us as to whether this discount came from Celotex through SIG and on to Harley?
I wouldn't be able to help you with that.
Well, we can ask Mr. Bailey about that. What I want to put to you, was this a reason for promoting the RS5000 product over other options at Grenfell because you would receive a very significant discount?
No. I wasn't aware of it. It's the only reasons that RS5000 would have been put forward on any projects were that we were being told it was appropriate for use above 18 metres, and it was one of the few installations that was capable of achieving the high performance requirements, and then that would have always been sent to the architect and building control for approval.
Did you get any discounts on other projects from Celotex for RS5000?
I had no involvement with discounting with Celotex products.
So you weren't aware whether there were any other discounts?
No.
Did you ever get similar discounts from any other insulation manufacturers on other projects, for example, Rockwool?
I wouldn't be aware of them if they were.
So I now, we're still sticking with the insulation. I now want to ask you about a request for information in September 2014. And I'm just going to explain or follow through how this came about. If we can turn to HAR 403638. And I want to start, this is an email chain from September 2014. I want to start at the bottom of this chain, at the bottom of page 4. And it begins with you there, 17th of September 2014, sending Simon Lawrence of Ryden, Simon O'Connor of Ryden, Neil Crawford, Studio E, and Bruce Soons. You send an email about Grenfell Tower cavity fire barriers. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And you say, please find attached RFI 001, which relates to the requirement of fire breaks. This may be something that's already been decided or may need confirmation from the local fire officer as the opinion tends to vary. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So in this email, you seem to be having some knowledge of what the local fire officer, what their opinion might be, and variation in the local fire officer's opinion. Do you agree?
I think this just goes back to my previous statement that even the people in authority did not fully understand the requirements, and it would just vary from place to place. I'm not stating that I know what that particular fire officer is going to want.
Okay.
It's because of that lack of clarity that we ask that question.
Now, if we turn to that RFI document, which was attached to the email, this is at EXO 401291. We can see that this is a request for information form. It's a Harley form. It's to Simon Lawrence at Ryden, and it's from you at Harley. Do you see that there?
Yes.
17th of September 2014. And you require an answer by the 26th of September 2014. And we can see that the query, please may you confirm the required extent of the horizontal fire breaks within the cladding areas. Do you see that there?
Yep.
And then you've put suggested solution. We believe that they will be required at every floor level on the vertical columns, but not in the area of cladding between windows. This is because there is no chimney effect here, and therefore the cladding will not add to the spread of fire. Do you see that?
Yep.
Now, did you draft that? Did you put that document together?
Yeah, I drafted that.
So, do you agree that this suggests that you are professing to have some knowledge or expertise in where fire barriers are required and whether or not there's going to be a chimney effect in certain parts of the cladding relevant to the spread of fire? Do you agree?
I think that I didn't fully understand it at that point, and I think I was just being asked to send an RFI. I can't remember by who, but I was asked to send an RFI because I wouldn't have had enough knowledge to be able to put that together.
So you're suggesting that this detail, these words, were not your own, is that right?
Yes.
That somebody else asked you to send that?
Yes.
And who could that have been?
Could have been Mark, it could have been Ray, it could have been Kevin.
Right, and the part about this is because there is no chimney effect here, and therefore the cladding will not add. That was not your opinion, is that what you're saying?
At that time, I knew that you were trying to stop the unseen spread of fire, but I didn't really know.
See, I would suggest... Sorry.
I didn't know much about it.
Well, I would suggest to you that this does indicate you were expressing an opinion about the spread of fire and what was required in terms of fire spread in the external cladding.
I would disagree.
Do you know what analysis had been done to get to this view?
No, because I didn't know about where fire breaks were really required.
Now, if we return to the email chain, if we go back to HAR 403638 on page 4, at the top of the page, we can see that on the 18th of September, yes, that's it, 18th of September, Neil Crawford of Studio E sends that on to Terry Ashton at Exova. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And he says, "Hi Terry, I'm working on the Grenfell Tower project for Studio E. The following RFIs come in relating to horizontal fire breaks within the cladding areas. Can you comment on the RFI attached and whether you believe this interpretation in relation to stack effect is correct? Regards, Neil." You see that there?
Yes.
And then at the bottom of page 3, we can see that Mr. Ashton responds with this. He says, "Neil, I've never seen details of what you're doing to the external walls. Do you have any cross-sections, elevations? Kind regards, Terry." You see that there?
Yes.
Now, I think we'll see that you get copied into this chain later. Did it concern you that the fire safety consultant hadn't seen any details of the proposed works to the external walls?
I wasn't aware of it at that time. I don't think I would have read down the whole email chain. If I got copied back in it later on, I would
I see.
read the response.
So you didn't think at the time that you ought to send some details as a matter of urgency to the fire engineer on the project?
On all other projects, you usually send the information to the main contractor and they send it out to the consultants or the architect.
Now, after Exova were provided with some Harley plans, Mr. Ashton then replies on the 18th of September 2014, so same day at 15:32. If we go to the bottom of page 2 and the top of page 3, so if we look at the very bottom, there's an email, we can just see the start of it from Terry Ashton, 18th September 15:32 from Terry Ashton. If we go over the page, he says, and it's to Neil Crawford, "Neil, if the insulation in the cavities behind the rain screen cladding is combustible, you will need to provide cavity barrier as shown on your drawing, number 127906120, in order to prevent fire from spreading from one flat to the one above, even if there isn't a continuous cavity from the top to the bottom of the building. Kind regards, Terry." Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then if we go up, one page up to the bottom of page 2, we can see Neil Crawford sends you that email chain. Neil Crawford to Daniel Anketell-Jones, 18th September 1550. "Daniel, please see correspondence relating to RFI 001 cavity barrier requirement below." Do you see that there?
Yep.
Regards, Neil. So he's pointing you to that correspondence.
Yep.
Are you saying now that you didn't read down those emails and have a look at what the debate was?
No, I would have looked at his response, but not gone any further. I can't remember going any further.
Now, Mr. Ashton has said, if the insulation in the cavities is combustible, you will need to provide a cavity barrier as shown on the drawing. What was your reaction to that advice? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember.
Do you remember whether you agreed with it or whether you had any concerns with it?
I wasn't able to make a judgment.
Okay. So you didn't ever query why Mr. Ashton appeared to be linking the combustibility of the insulation to the requirement for cavity barriers? That wasn't something that you ever queried?
Not that I can remember.
Did you think about what guidance Mr. Ashton might be referring to when he gave this advice?
The building regulations, I would have assumed at that point.
But you didn't check at that point and look at, say, approved document B to see what he might have been referring to?
No, because we would always refer back to them for the guidance and follow what they told us.
Now, this advice, if we go up the chain to your email immediately above, back to Neil Crawford. If we can scroll up, yeah. So then you say, Daniel Anketell-Jones, 18th September, same day, 1603, to Neil Crawford, CCing Simon Lawrence and others at Ryden. Neil, thank you for your response. The insulation is class naught. Therefore, after reading the correspondence below, I believe that the fire barrier in these locations will not be necessary. Can you confirm that this is acceptable? Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to ask you some questions about that, but I just want to show you another version of that email so I can make good the point that actually when you sent that email, here we're seeing it in a chain, but when you sent it, you also attached the Celotex RS5000 data sheet. So if we can pull that up now. So this is at HAR 30s12103. So you can see at the top of that, so this is a Harley version of that email. And we can see at the top of that page that here we can see that there was an attachment, rain screen cladding product data sheet, August 14 PDF. Do you see that at the top?
Yes.
So it's the same email, but we can see here that there was the attachment. And I just want to pull up the attachment. This is HAR 30s12104. So it's the next email in the Harley document. It's the next document in the Harley run of docs. And this is the RS5000 Celotex data sheet. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, was this the first time that you provided Studio E and Ryden with any indication that the insulation was going to be RS5000?
I honestly don't know.
You don't know?
I would have assumed that they were completely aware of what was going to be on there, and at that point I believed that they were the same product as that was in the NBS specification.
If you thought it was the same product as in the NBS specification, why were you attaching this RS5000 data sheet for them to see?
Yeah.
Why were you telling them what the product was?
I would always do that on all projects, would be to send them the actual data sheets.
Can we go back to the email again and look at it? HAR 30s12103. You say the insulation is class naught. Therefore, after reading the correspondence below, I believe that the fire barrier in these locations will not be necessary. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So do you agree that you are giving advice in this email about what your opinion is of the fire classification of the insulation and whether that means that fire barriers are necessary in certain locations? Do you agree?
No, I disagree. I think that this shows that I didn't understand the fire classifications, that I didn't know where fire barriers were required, and that I believed that it was up to the consultants to tell us where they needed to go.
If that's right, why didn't you just respond saying, I can't help you, I don't know about fire classifications, you need to direct your question to the fire consultant or Studio E?
But this is me asking them a question to start with. They've come back with another answer, and I'm asking them if my interpretation of their answer is correct.
No, what's happened is Mr. Ashton has come back and queried whether the installation is combustible and said if it is combustible, you'll need to do certain things. And you've been asked for your response to that, and you have said the installation is class naught. Therefore, after reading it, this correspondence, I believe that the fire barrier in these locations will not be necessary. I'm going to put it to you that this is you offering your opinion on fire performance.
Now, this is me asking if my interpretation of what they've said is correct, that they've come back and said that if it's combustible, you have to do A, and I've gone back and said, well, it's class O, so does that mean we can do B?
Well, it goes a bit further than that, doesn't it? Because you do seem to be venturing an opinion of your own on the basis that...
Yeah, based on what he's replied. And then, it's clearly stated at the bottom, I'm asking whether that's right.
It would seem to reflect your view of what's meant by class naught. Would that be fair?
Yeah, at that time I wasn't trained in fire at all, and he sent back something about that it was about what happens if it's combustible or not combustible, and I've gone and looked at the sheet and seen that it's class O, so I've sent it back to him, asking him if the interpretation is correct.
Why did you think it was relevant to tell people that the insulation was class naught? What did you think the relevance of that was?
At that time, as I said before, I wasn't trained or taught about fire classifications. I'd looked at the sheet, and that was the only thing that I'd seen on there. So I sent it back to him.
I see. And was that the only check you carried out, to look at the data sheet before you responded?
Yes, that was all at that point in my career. That was all I would have known to.
You didn't check with anybody else or check any other guidance before you responded?
No, I wouldn't have known what else to look for at all. I was a structural engineer at that point.
I think if we go back to the long email chain, HAR 403638. Sorry, it's not that one. I think there was what we see is there was another request for you to confirm. That's right, sorry, it was in Mr. Ashton's. Yes, go back to that, HAR 403638. And we look at Mr. Ashton's reply that you were being asked to comment on. So that's the bottom of page 2, yeah, and on to the top of page 3. If we can go to page 3. He says, if it's combustible, you will need to provide, even if there isn't a continuous cavity from the top to the bottom of the building. Did you ever confirm whether there was a continuous cavity from the top to the bottom of the building?
No.
Did you ever go back to Mr. Ashton or Mr. Crawford about the extent of the external wall cavity?
No, I think in this email chain it's only talking about the parts between the windows. So I don't think that part had been discussed yet.
Do you agree with me that more relevant questions about the insulation were whether the insulation was of limited combustibility or whether the system had been tested to BR 135 and 8414? Wasn't that where the debate should have gone?
Looking back on it now with that knowledge about fire performance of products and testing of products, yes. But at that point, I had no training in that respect, which is why I always referred it on to fire engineers.
Now, if we now turn on and we look at a further development on this chain to HAR 403638. HAR 403638. what we see here is in the top email, Mr. Crawford is emailing Terry Ashton and CCing you on the, again, this is all happening on the 18th of September 2014 on the same day. This is now at 17:11. And he says, "Hi Terry, thank you. Daniel, can you confirm your position in relation to Terry's comment below regarding combustibility and continuous cavity paths? Having just finished several weeks of fire-stopping checks on the Kensington Aldridge Academy, where John Hoban crawled into almost every conceivable cavity possible with a torch, including nearly falling through a suspended ceiling, we need to be clear on our position before going to building control. Regards, Neil." So would you agree that even though you're only CC'd into that, there's a part of that email from Mr. Crawford that's directly addressed to you? Do you see that?
Yes, I can see that.
And if we look down at what Terry Ashton said below that, he said this: "Neil, a material which has a Class 0 rating is not necessarily non-combustible, although the reverse is invariably true. Some Class 0 products will burn when exposed to a fully developed fire. In any case, you need to prevent fire spread from," I think he means one flat, "to the flat above, as I stated in my earlier email. What isn't clear from the information to hand is whether or not there is a continuous cavity from top to bottom in any part of the cladding, apart from around the column casings, irrespective of the type of insulation." Do you see that there?
Yes.
So that's the advice Terry Ashton was giving, and you're sent that. Can you recall what was your reaction to that?
I can't recall. I believe that from seeing information later on that we put in cavity barriers at every floor level, so we must have taken on board what he was saying.
But what was your reaction in terms of what he's saying about the insulation? Because what he's saying there is a material with a Class 0 rating is not necessarily non-combustible. Some Class 0 products will burn when exposed to a fully developed fire. Isn't that potentially warning you that Class 0 is not enough?
Honestly, at that point, I didn't understand the difference. And if I'd read this, I can't remember what I would have thought.
Well, we know you're sent it, and you're specifically asked some questions about it by Mr. Crawford. Did this email cause you any concern about your statement that the insulation was Class 0?
I can't remember.
You can't remember. Do you know whether it in any way caused you to reconsider the assessment of whether Celotex RS 5000 was suitable for Grenfell Tower?
I was under the impression that the Celotex product had been already approved by the architect and building control officer and the fire engineer. So it wouldn't have occurred to me to question them.
I see. So even though the fire engineer is coming back and saying to you, Class 0, you've got to be careful around Class 0, it's kind of, that's me paraphrasing what he said in the first couple of lines, you're saying that didn't prompt any reconsideration in your mind about whether or not to use RS 5000 for the Grenfell project?
No, because I thought that all those people had already approved the product.
Did you ever raise the combustibility of the insulation with anyone at Ryden, Exova or Studio E? Did you ever independently raise that question with them?
No.
And can you remember ever going back about your position in relation to Terry's comment below about combustibility and continuous cavity paths? If we go back to the email at the top, Neil Crawford is asking you to confirm your position. Can you confirm your position in relation to Terry's comment below about combustibility and continuous cavity paths? We can't find any response. Do you know whether you ever did respond to that email?
I can't remember.
You can't remember what advice you gave at that point?
No.
Did you ever take any steps after this to investigate further whether the RS 5000 product was compliant?
No, because as far as I was concerned, it had already been checked for compliance by people who understood it far better than I did.
Did you speak to Celotex again to get any more information and to raise with them the fact that Class Naught might not be the entire answer to whether it could be used at Grenfell?
No, because this didn't jump out at me at that time. I have no memory of it.
Now, I want to put it to you directly before we move on from this topic, that if you look at the emails, as we've done today, between you and Mr. Room in August 2014, when you're discussing the quantity of RS5000 to use on the Grenfell project, and you also put it together with this email chain a month later in September, where you forward the RS5000 data sheet and you say the installation is Class Naught, I want to put it to you directly. Do you accept that it appears to have been you, as the person within Harley, who took the decision to use RS5000 on the Grenfell project?
No. It was decided long before I was involved. I never put the product forward, never selected it, never made any decision about using it on the project.
So can you help us as to who within Harley did authorise the use of RS5000 from Harley's own perspective?
I don't know.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think that would be a good moment for a break, because I want to move on to another topic. And I just would like 5 minutes to review my questions.
Yes, well, let's have a break there. Then. We'll have a short break now, Mr. Anketell-Jones. We'll come back to 3:30, and then that'll give you a little bit more time to organise your
Thank you.
All right. No talking to anyone about your evidence, please, while you're out of the room. And so if you'd like to go with the usher, she'll look after you. Thank you. Good. 3:30 then, please. Secure. Yes, would you ask Mr. Anketell-Jones to come back in, please? All right, ready to carry on?
Yes.
Good, thank you. Yes,
Hi
Mr.
there.
Jones?
Yes, just to pick up one discrete topic that arose yesterday, which was about CVs. Do you remember we looked at your CV that Ryden had put forward as
Yes.
part of its tender proposals? And you said yesterday that there were certain parts of that CV that weren't accurate, like your involvement in the Chalcots estate. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And you said that that CV was produced without your knowledge or consent. Can we just look at a document relevant to this story? This is at RYD 402798. So this is an email, you're not copied in here, from Mark Harris to Simon Lawrence on the 6th of February 2014. And it's CCing Mike Alberston and Katie Batchillier there. And it's about CVs. He says, "Morning, Simon. Please find attached CV summaries of 3 members of the Harley design and delivery team. There will also be a project-specific site manager, but at this stage I could not confirm a name. I've purposely kept each CV to a single page, but can elaborate on experience and qualifications for each individual if so desired. Alternatively, I can send a full CV for each." Do you see that?
Yes.
And then we can see that the CVs that were sent were for you, Mark Stapley and Rob Maxwell, and those are the 3 CVs that we see in the Ryden tender package. Now, we've checked those CVs that are sent there by Mark Harris, and they are identical to the ones that we showed you yesterday in the Ryden tender, including your CV. Now, what I want to ask you, I appreciate you're not involved in this here. Did Mark Harris check with you whether your CV was accurate before it was sent?
Not that I have any recollection of, no.
Do you remember having a chance to review the CV before it was sent out?
I didn't even know it had been sent out.
Can you help us as to how Mark Harris might have sent a CV relating to you that had inaccuracies?
No. You'd have to ask him.
Okay. Now, I now want to turn to a bit of a more detailed look at exactly how the design process worked on the Grenfell project. And in due course, I'm going to take you to look at the process for approving drawings on the Grenfell project. So that's this topic. Just to kick that off, were you aware that there were any regular design reviews carried out during the Grenfell project, either formal design reviews or informal design reviews that happened with Kevin Lamb?
I would have expected that he would have been sending the drawings to the architect and design team for their review.
But did Harley have any kind of processes in place to, if you like, kind of draw a line in the sand and take stock of where the designer got to and review the design as it went through? Or was Kevin Lamb just left to get on with dealing with the drawings and sending those to Ryden and Studio E as appropriate?
He was left to do the work, yes.
Did you personally check the drawings that were being produced by Kevin Lamb?
No.
You didn't? You don't have any memory of doing that?
No, I have a memory of passing some on to the managing director for him to check, but I was working on another project.
Okay, we'll look at some emails relevant to that in a moment. Do you accept that you were regularly copied into emails on the project?
From what I've been shown, yes.
Yeah. So even after Mr. Lamb's appointment, you were regularly copied into emails about the project, yes?
Yeah, for a period.
When you say for a period, what do you mean by that?
At some point, I became completely uninvolved with the project. I can't remember when it was, but I think that at some point I stopped receiving emails on the project.
And can we just look at something that Mr. Albiston has said in his witness statement about your role? If we look at HAR 30010151, page 3, paragraph 9, I want to pick up. So this is Mr. Albiston's witness statement, 3 lines down. He says this: the specification was also reviewed by Daniel Anketell-Jones, Harley. Daniel Anketell-Jones would have been looking at the tender documents from a more technical and design point of view. For example, he would be looking to see that the materials specified were suitable for that job. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And I wanted to give you the chance to respond to what Mr. Albiston said there about your role. Do you agree with his description?
No, I think that, again, it's there's confusion in timeframes, because at this point I wasn't educated enough, or hadn't done enough of the MSc to be able to be responsible for those sorts of things.
I just want to look at some exchanges between you and Mr. Lamb. Let's just start with the witness statement of Kevin Lamb. This is HAR 30010419 at page 5. And I want to look at paragraph 22. So if we look down there, so he's talking about some Studio E drawings forming the basis of his design, along with discussions with both Daniel Anketell-Jones and Ray Bailey. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then he says this: I sent preliminary key concept general assembly drawings on 20th of August 2014 to Daniel Anketell-Jones for his input and approval to issue to Ryden and Studio E. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, do you remember being sent those key concept general assembly drawings by Kevin Lamb?
I don't remember, but I've been shown the emails where it happened.
And you agree that it did happen?
Yes.
Yeah. Can we look at another example? So if we go to HAR 403634, this is the 22nd of September 2014. If we look in the email at the top, from you to Kevin Lamb, subject Grenfell Design. Kev, could you make one change, detail 304, change it to 2 angles in the shadow gap to allow for tolerance. These can be issued then. Will you be able to attend tomorrow's meeting? Will you be able to table the other details then? Kind regards, Daniel. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So you said earlier that you weren't personally checking any of the drawings that were produced by Kevin Lamb. Do you agree that this suggests that you did sometimes check the drawings?
I would have been checking them for structural requirements and sort of fabrication things to make sure that they could be installed. But I would expect that everything to do with other elements of performance that I wasn't concerned with to go back to the architect and building control, such as, conformity to building regulations. These were, looking at them from a point of view of structural performance and whether it could be fabricated.
I see. And what's this an example of? Angles in the shadow gap. Would you say that's fabrication?
Yeah.
Can we look at some more examples? If we go to HAR 403636, it's on the 25th of September 2014. And we can see from the bottom email that Kevin said, please check attached. The vents do not quite manage 5,000 millimeters squared. Increasing the vent width will get that. And however, didn't you mention only 2,500 millimeters squared when we were at the meeting? Regards, Kevin. And then above that, you've said, these look fine to me. Can you issue them to everyone, please? Do you see that there?
Yes.
And we can also see you potentially amending drawings in November 2014. If we go to HAR 403785, this is on the 20th of November, from Mark Stapley to Kevin Lamb, CCing you and Rob Maxwell. And you say, hi, Kevin, thanks for sending over the drawings. Dan is going to modify die drawings EX03 and 04, so we can reduce the width to 120 millimetres. This will be achieved by increasing the wall thickness on the leg with the serrated edge. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So that suggests that you were going to modify a drawing at that point, or drawings.
Yeah, so
Do you agree?
these were the structural drawings for the dies.
Right.
I would have been involved in that.
Yeah. Then can we move on to the 7th of May 2015? This is HAR 404089. And this is Grenfell Tower, 7th of May 2015, so much further on in time. And you say, hi, Kev. When you get a sec, would you mind sending me the latest drawing model for Grenfell? I'm trying to catch up with all the calcs. Thanks, Dan. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And then the response is at HAR 404224. If we can look at that. And there he says, Kevin Lamb, Dan attached. However, the layout has become a bit messy, so please call if you can't locate the info you want. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Can you help us as to what you were going to be checking on these drawings?
So I would have, for every project, they need a set of structural calculations. Through the design process, you do each bit as it's required and submit it, and then you probably do a complete tidy up at some point. I think I was just trying to do a tidy up and make sure that everything was as had been drawn, so all the right angles were aligned with what was in the calculations before doing a final submittal.
Right, yeah. Did you ever come across any issues with Mr. Lamb's work, whether one-off issues or recurrent issues? Did you ever have cause to speak to him about his design work?
No. No.
And just going back to how much time you were spending on the project, we know that you were doing the facade degree part-time. Is it right, I think you said yesterday, that it was that 1 day a week you were taken out studying on that course?
You'd have a week out at a time, and then you'd usually have a week to do the work that had been set afterwards.
So during the time you were doing that course, what would you say? What % of your time for Harley was taken out by doing that course? Would you estimate?
I think over the course of a year it'd be 8 weeks.
Yeah, okay. Now we can see later in the project that there are examples where many drawings are issued without your approval or prior review. Let's just look at an example of that. This is SEA 30133550. So this is Kevin Lamb on the 18th of August 2015, so later in time, to Simon Lawrence, copying in Ben Bailey, Mark Stapley, you, Ray Bailey, Neil Crawford. And there's a lot of drawings, GA drawing, are they general arrangement drawings that are being issued at that time? Do you see that there?
Yes.
And he says, Neil, please find attached, these are curtain wall drawings, all now issued for construction based on your comments, 7th of August 15. The only item that's deviated from your markups are the internal jam flashings on drawing 352. Do you see that there? Now, they seem to be curtain wall drawings. Does that mean they were probably about the lower levels of the tower?
Yes.
In practice, how did you decide which of Mr. Lamb's drawings to check? I mean, was there some kind of system or practice that you were following in terms of what you would be checking of his work and what you wouldn't check?
No, it would only be from individual discussions. Sometimes he'd send something to me and I might print it off and take it up to Ray to look at. But generally it would be almost entirely kept to the structural parts because he had the prior knowledge of, detailing and fabrication to be able to proceed on his own.
At this point, I just want to ask you some more detailed questions about the process for approving or signing off on drawings. Can you explain to us in general terms what the process was by which drawings were issued by Harley and then checked and signed off? What was your understanding of the process that was followed at Grenfell?
On Grenfell, I'd only be making an assumption. I can tell you what it was on other projects and how Grenfell would have worked from that.
So does that mean that at the time you weren't aware of what the process was?
No, I wasn't. I wasn't submitting drawings or getting comments back. I was primarily concerned that the work was happening.
How would Kevin Lamb, if you're line managing Kevin Lamb, you're the design manager and he's the project designer, how would he know what the process was for getting drawings issued and approved and signed off? If you don't know, how would he know?
Any time that we brought in an external designer before, it wasn't like the designers in the office. You're trying to bring in someone who's competent and capable of running on their own. And with an external designer, the checks you're doing is making sure that they're keeping to programme.
So does that mean you expected Kevin Lamb, off his own back, to be in touch with Ryden and Studio E to discuss what the process was for approving drawings?
Yeah, as the designer on the project, that's what you'd expect.
I see. So that was your expectation, was it? And did you understand that Kevin Lamb was doing that, was checking with Ryden and others what the process was for approving drawings?
I would have thought that that's what had happened, yes.
Can we just look at a few examples of what seemed to happen with some of the drawings in terms of the process for getting them finally signed off and approved for construction? Can you turn to SEA 3012756? And I want to start by looking at the email at the bottom of page 1 and over onto page 2. So right at the bottom there, we see on the 17th of February 2015 at 11:04, Kevin Lamb is sending an email to Neil Crawford, Bruce Soons, you, Mark Stapley, Rob Maxwell, Ben Bailey. And if we go over to the next page, he says, sorry, we just need to look at, is that the very top of that page? Can we maybe go back to the bottom of page 1? Yes, sorry, it's important to note he's addressing that to Simon. Do you see that? Simon Lawrence. Do you see that there at the very bottom of the page?
Yes.
The email of 17th February at 11:04. Simon, so this is Simon Lawrence of Ryden. And then over the next page, he's saying, please find attached revised Type 10 windows now with symmetry as requested. Please approve and forward your official instruction for us so that as we can proceed with remakes of those in manufacture. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So this is Kevin Lamb sending to Simon Lawrence for approval. Now, looking up this email chain, if we go back onto page 1, we can see that Neil Crawford at Studio E then responds on the same day at 12:12. Hi, Kevin, please see attached comment. Do you see that there?
Yep.
So Kevin Lamb is addressing his initial email to Simon Lawrence, but it's Neil Crawford who's responding first. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Who, on your understanding, was responsible for checking and approving the drawings for construction?
It would have been the architect.
The architect, Neil Crawford, so not Ryden.
No.
And what would that checking and approval process actually entail? Did you have an understanding of it?
Not on Grenfell. It was never specifically spelt out. I'd be guessing.
Okay. Now, if we turn to the drawing that Mr. Crawford attaches with his comment, if we go to SEA 403093, this is Mr. Crawford's annotation on that drawing, and we can see what he's done. I think he confirmed that was his writing in red. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So he's made a comment better to hinge this way as per sketch of email. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And he's marked it in the stamp on the right-hand side, the Studio E architect stamp. He's marked it status B. Now, it's a little bit difficult to read here, but what status B says there is conforms to design intent, subject to incorporation of comments, revise and resubmit for category A status. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, was it your understanding on the project that in these circumstances the drawings did have to be resubmitted after incorporation of Neil Crawford's comments?
Sorry, can you reread the bit in that is not clear?
Yeah, you want me to reread the category B comment?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so what it says is conforms to design intent, subject to incorporation of comments, revise and resubmit for category A status. Now, my question to you is, was it your understanding in these circumstances, so where it's marked category B, it's not A, it's not conforms to design intent, was it your understanding in those circumstances that the drawing should be resubmitted to the architect after incorporating the comments they'd made?
Trying to look back on it, I have no memory of any conclusions I would have drawn on this.
Yeah. So you can't help us as to whether it routinely happened on the project that the drawings would be resubmitted to get the category A status?
No, I can't help you on that.
Now, also on this drawing, we can see a printed stamp on the bottom right of the drawing. If we zoom out again, can you see there someone's put approved for construction on the bottom? There's a stamp there. Do you see that?
Yes.
Now, do you know who applied that stamp, or who would have applied that stamp to this drawing?
I don't know who did it. No.
It appears
Just be a guess.
to us to be, this is a Harley drawing, and it appears that Harley had stamped it approved for construction before it had been reviewed by Neil Crawford and his stamp.
I mean, there's a lot of revisions there. I mean, how would you know he hadn't checked it at one of those previous revisions?
Right, well, I think we've tried to check, and we're not aware that this drawing did get category A status prior to this. Were you aware on other drawings of it being, these drawings being approved for construction with that kind of stamp before they'd been sent to Studio E, or indeed Ryden?
No, I wasn't aware.
Whose role would you have thought it was to apply that approved for construction stamp on the project?
It would be the designer's role to put that on their interpretation of that statement next to the B.
So would you expect Mr. Lamb to be applying that approved for construction stamp after they've got a category A from the architect?
I think rereading this now, I would still read that as that you resubmit it with those comments incorporated means it has a category A.
I see. So you're saying that we can read this not as a category B, but as category A, assuming these comments are going to be incorporated?
Yes.
But wouldn't the architect want to check that whatever comments had been made had been properly transposed over to the next version of the drawings?
I mean, talking from experience now, it's commonly done that way, that the architect will put his comments on the drawing and he'll status it that if those comments are incorporated, it can be assumed that it's a status A.
But that's not what the B stamp says here, is it?
No, but reading it now, that's the way that I interpret it.
I see. So just following the story of this drawing a bit further, if we go back to, we go to SEA 30122758. This is a further email from Kevin Lamb on that day, 17th February 2015, to Simon Lawrence again, CCing Neil Crawford and others, including you, on the Grenfell project. And he says, Simon, the window mods are now approved by Neil as attached. So all we need now is your official go-ahead to proceed. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So was it your understanding that ultimately Simon Lawrence of Ryden had the final responsibility for approving the drawings for construction?
No, I didn't have that understanding.
And who was it you thought was responsible for approving the drawings for construction?
To approve them for construction, I would have thought it was the architect.
I see. Do you think this might have been a special case where Harley or Kevin Lamb here wanted an instruction from Ryden over and above the normal process to proceed with the drawings?
I don't know what the time frames are here, but I would have thought it was a... Again, I'm just guessing that it was to do because it was ordering materials and he wanted to be certain that everyone was happy with it.
Right. And if we just finish this off, if we go SEA 3012761, we see Simon Lawrence replies to this chain. And there we have that. Again, you're copied in. Hi, Kevin. Neil has completed his comments and is happy, so you can proceed. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So you can't help us as to whether that process was typical of the process that was adopted for assessment and approval of drawings on the project?
Not for this project, no.
Would it be fair to say that this step-by-step process did not always occur in such a clear manner in respect of amendments to and approval of Harley drawings?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Would it be fair to say that this step-by-step process, sending it to Ryden, waiting for the architect comments, getting it back, then Ryden confirming again that they're happy, that step-by-step process didn't always occur in respect of amendments to and approval of Harley drawings? Would you agree with that?
I was under the belief that the process of sending them to the architect and getting them approved did always happen.
Let's look at another example. If we go to SEA 3013221, and I want to look at the second email at the bottom of page 1. This is 29th of May from Kevin Lamb to Simon Lawrence, CCing the same individuals in. And he writes, Neil, please find attached drawings for the crown element for approval. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So although the email is being sent by Kevin to Simon Lawrence, it's being addressed in the body of the email to Neil Crawford. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And can you help us as to why you would have sent it to Simon but addressed it to Neil?
No, I can't.
We can then see at the top of this email chain that Neil responds to Kevin and says, please find attached comments on the crown drawings. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And if we look at the attachment to that, this is RYD 3043547. RYD, yeah. And I want to look at page 4. And we can see that Neil Crawford has stamped the drawing status B and annotated the drawing regarding metal copings and flashing at the roof parapet. Do you see that there? There's the red comment and the bubbles.
Yes.
It says, existing roof parapet requires to be surveyed and metal copings flashing to fit over. Do you see that there?
Yes.
And he's marked it status B again. Do you see that there?
Yes.
It's clearly B, not A. And if we can now turn to SEA 3013262, we can see from the bottom email that Mr. Lamb then sends another email to Simon Lawrence, copying you and others in, on the 1st of July 2015. And he says, Neil, please find attached revised coping detail to the crown element. Do you see that there?
Yep.
And he says, if you could have a quick look and pass your comments, we should then reissue the whole of this element for construction based on your previous approvals.
Yes.
And he makes another comment about the shorter coping in the last line. And then if we go up, we can see that Mr. Lamb's actually sent it initially to the wrong Neil and then sends it to the right Neil. And then Neil Crawford at the top of that page responds on the 1st of July. Hi, Kevin, please see attached, regards, Neil. Do you see that there? And attaches another drawing. If we can look at that, that's at SEA 30013263. So that, we think that's the same drawing, and this time we've got status A, window head coping, conforms to design intent. Do you see that there?
Yes.
In the Studio E stamp. And if we keep following the story of this same drawing, can we now turn to HAR 404443, HAR 40443, and if we look at this, this is from Kevin Lamb to Simon Lawrence, copying in others. But again, it's addressed to Neil. And he says, main entrance adjusted as per your further comments this morning, cladding drawing just with additional set info for the installers. Do you see that there?
Yes.
So it would appear that Neil Crawford makes some additional comments on the drawing, and then Neil Crawford to Kevin Lamb, no further comments as attached. And if we go to that attachment, if we go SEA 403310 at page 3, SEA 403310 page 3, we can see that this is now revision B of the drawing, which was amended on the 26th of August 2015. We can see that at the bottom. Do you see that there?
Yeah, at the start of this chain, it was talking about the crown.
Yeah.
And then this last email, it was talking about the main entrance.
Yes.
But then it's got
Then it's back to this again.
But
This appears to be the drawing that's attached, we think,
Okay.
by Neil Crawford, and it's marked status A. What I wanted to ask you is, in that example, it appeared to be Neil Crawford responding saying, hi, Kevin, no further comments as attached, whereas before it was sent to Simon Lawrence. And again, my question is, can you help us as to which was more representative of the typical approach to drawings? Was it Simon Lawrence or Neil Crawford who ultimately approved the drawings for construction?
I wasn't working closely enough to it to be able to say definitely, but it was always my impression that it was the architect who was approving drawings.
Can we look now at HAR 404590? This is an email of the 20th of October 2015 from Kevin Lamb to Simon Lawrence, copying you and others in. And there's a large number of drawings there. And he writes, Neil, so he's addressing it again to Neil Crawford. Please find attached GF curtain wall elements for comment approval. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, one of those, in the second line of the attachments, the middle drawing, is at one called C1059 GA model 50223. Do you see that?
Yes.
And if we can turn up that drawing, this is a SEA 503316. Now we can see clearly here that this hasn't got a Studio E stamp, so it's not yet been reviewed by Mr. Crawford, but we can see in the bottom right-hand corner that it's said to be approved for construction. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Can you help us as to why this drawing would be said to be approved for construction when it hasn't yet been considered by the architect?
No, I wouldn't.
Mr. Crawford then replies to the email. If we turn to HAR 404669, HAR 404669, and we have Mr. Crawford, 22nd of October 2015, saying, "Hi Kevin, please see attached comments on ground floor." And then if we turn to the attachments and the drawing that we were looking at, which is the C1059223 drawing, if we go to HAR 404670 at page 3, here we can see that Mr. Crawford has made a number of comments to the drawing and stamped it status B. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, following this drawing through, Mr. Lamb then responds to Mr. Crawford's email. This is HAR 404743. So this is Kevin Lamb to Neil Crawford at Studio E, 26th of November 2015. And he copies a number of people at Harley, including you. But Mr. Lawrence, so Simon Lawrence isn't copied into this email or sent this email. And he says, "Neil, please find attached GF curtain wall drawings revised in accordance with your comments." Do you see that there?
Yes.
And in the attachments, that same drawing, C1059 GA model 51223A is there. And that's revision A of the drawing. And if we can turn now to HAR 401999. This is an email on the same date, the 26th of November 2015, from Ben Bailey to Mike and Lucy at AGF, their Aluminium Glass Facades Limited. I think they're a fabricator, is that right?
I don't know, to be honest.
And Ben Bailey writes, "Please see our construction issue drawings attached for Grenfell Tower." And we can see the second email down on this chain is the email from Kevin Lamb returning the revised drawings to Neil Crawford. If we look down that page, that was Kevin Lamb returning them to Neil Crawford. If we go over to the next page, we can see that. But we can't find any response from Neil Crawford confirming the revisions are acceptable and stamping the drawing status A, and yet it's been sent by Ben Bailey to the fabricators. And the question that we wanted to put to you is, would it be usual for Harley to send out construction issue drawings without waiting for Studio E to revert with a stamped status A drawing?
It wouldn't be normal on other projects, no.
Do you agree it would be best practice to wait for Mr. Crawford to return, having marked the drawings as status A?
The only reason that you'd send them out beforehand is if you're trying to get approximate pricing for something. Otherwise, it would be best practice.
But do you agree that that might deprive Studio E and Ryden of the opportunity to see the final version before it was issued for construction?
if that was done, yes.
Was there anyone supervising you as the design manager during the Grenfell project? So we've talked about your supervision of Mr. Lamb, but was anybody supervising you as his design manager?
I wasn't his design manager on anything more than programme, and that was to be reported back to the project manager and contracts manager, so they would have been interested in how he was maintaining programme, and it would have been reported back that way. My line manager was Mark Stapley, but every time that we brought in an external design resource, it was that they were competent to do the work under their own steam. They wouldn't be line managed from a point of view of checking the quality of their work. The point of going to a external design resource at that time was because you needed someone who was capable and wasn't going to have to have someone shadowing all their work.
Yeah, okay. On projects of this size and complexity, in your experience, would it be normal to have a matrix of responsibilities setting out which contractor or subcontractor was responsible for each element of the design?
On other projects, that was the normal thing to do.
Yeah. Did you ever query why on the Grenfell project there was no such design responsibility matrix?
I think because of my limited involvement, I didn't get involved to that extent.
So does it follow that you didn't think it was unusual that no such design responsibility matrix had been established on the project?
On other projects, they had been established. I'm not sure if they'd become the norm as they are now.
To your knowledge, did anyone at Harley ever suggest that such a matrix might be helpful on the project?
No.
Do you think such a matrix would have been helpful on the project?
From looking back at it now, yes, it would have.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to ask you some questions about the ACM in a moment, but before we get to that, I just want to look at what you say at paragraph 26 of your witness statement about the design process more generally. This is at HAR 30010149 at page 6. I want to look at paragraph 26. HAR, sorry, yeah, thank you. So if we can read what you say there, you say there is a hierarchy in construction design where the senior design team consisting of the architects, consultants, fire, acoustic and structural, and building control sit at the top. The main contractor sits under this, and the subcontractor designers sit at the bottom. The senior design team are seen as the experts, and therefore their opinion is always deferred to by everyone sitting below them. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, would you agree that Harley had a responsibility to consider the viability of the design regardless of any perceived hierarchy?
I think Harley could only comment on and, perceive the viability of the design on the areas that they were expected to be experts in, which was the fabrication and installation parts. That's where their expertise lied. Points such as, performances were not, certainly at that time without a technical manager, where their expertise lied.
Do you agree in terms of fire performance that Harley could reasonably be expected to provide design input on a project like Grenfell?
I don't see how they could without that expertise.
Do you accept that when it came to specialist design input in relation to the facade, Harley were not sitting at the bottom of the hierarchy? That when it came to the facade as specialists, Harley were actually higher up that hierarchy than you portrayed in that paragraph?
Only on the points of installation and fabrication.
You go on to say in the next main paragraph, third line down at the top of page 7, so if we go over the page within paragraph 27, you say this third line down there, as far as I was aware, the materials were all compliant as they'd all been selected and specified by architects, and the specification and drawings had been reviewed and approved by a fire consultant and building control. I'm not aware of anyone raising any issue or concerns about the materials being used at any stage. Now, we've done a lot, and I don't want to go over it again, about whether it had been selected and specified by the architects. But I want to ask you a bit about the fire consultant. You say, and drawings had been reviewed and approved by a fire consultant. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Which fire consultant are you referring to?
Right. If I'm talking about my knowledge then, I would have just known that there was a fire consultant on the project. Looking back at it now, I would say that was Exova.
Yeah, so you wouldn't have known at the time that it was Exova?
No, I wasn't involved enough with the project.
So would you agree that at the time you wouldn't have known that the architect's drawings and the specification had been approved by a fire consultant?
No, I would have expected that to have been done at what I was referred to as the stage 4 design.
Did you ever seek any assurances that a fire consultant had reviewed the drawings?
No, but if I'd been the designer on the project, it's what I would have done.
Would it be fair to say that you did not take any positive steps to confirm that a fire consultant had approved the drawings?
It's fair to say that, but it wasn't my position to do that.
Were you ever under the impression that it was Harley's responsibility to establish a fire strategy for the cladding design?
No, I would have assumed that that was done before the stage 4 design by the architect.
That was something Mr. Soon said in his evidence. That's the transcript at day 12, page 168, line 9, that it was Harley's responsibility to establish a fire strategy for the cladding design. You don't agree with that, is that?
No,
is that
I
right?
think it goes back to what you said about having a design matrix.
Now, I want to ask you some questions about the ACM. Mr. Chairman, I won't finish this topic today, but if you're happy to sit till 4:30, I'd like to keep going for now.
Yes, right.
Thank you. Can we start by looking at the design team meeting minutes on the 13th of August 2014? This is at RYD 30168885. So this is the design team meeting number 1 on the 13th of August 2014, and we can see that you are present there at the bottom of the first column of lists of names. Dan Anketell-Jones and Kevin Lamb, we see that there.
Yes.
And if we go to section 7 on page 5 and read at the bottom at 7.01, we can see it says planning. An overview of the planning application and discharge was given by BC and SL to bring everyone up to speed. So that would be Simon Lawrence and who BC is there. Following several months of discussions, mock-ups and negotiations, the final material submission was forwarded to planners at the end of July. Formal sign-off is anticipated 29th of August 2014. Our feelings are that the risk around planning sign-off is now low, as the design to date is now in line with the planner's requests. SL confirmed that we are to proceed design based on the following criteria: champagne-coloured cladding panels for the main part of the building. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Rain screen cladding to be cassette, hidden fixing type. And then he goes on about other aspects of it. Was it your understanding by this point, so I think this is the first design team meeting and you're there, was it your understanding that by this point the decision had been taken to use the Rainabond rain screen cladding panels?
Yes.
Did you understand at the time that the product was formed of 2 thin sheets of aluminium with a low-density polyethylene PE core? Did you understand that at the time?
I understood that it had a core, but I didn't understand what it was.
Can you explain why you weren't interested in the core? Why was that not something you wanted to know as the design manager for this project? What was in the core of the main rain screen panels?
I think for this project, I was only responsible for making sure that Kevin got started and then to make sure he got on according to programme. In respect of other projects, I would usually submit all that information to building control and the architect to get signed off.
But can I just ask, from a structural point of view, you'd need to know the weight of the panels, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And therefore possibly their composition.
That's usually specified as an overall weight per metre squared.
Now, I've asked you a little bit about your knowledge of other cladding fires, and I think you've said that you didn't have much knowledge at the time of cladding fires, whether domestic or international. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So were you not aware at this time that there had been cladding fires abroad on buildings containing polyethylene PE cord panels?
No.
You weren't aware of that? If you'd been asked what is the core made of, would you have been able to give an answer?
No.
So you didn't understand that there was polyethylene in the core?
Not that I can remember, no.
Had you been told that it was polyethylene, would you have had any concerns in terms of fire performance with a polyethylene core?
At that point, I don't think it would have jumped out. I think that I'd worked on projects previously where the same products had been signed off, and if it had been signed off by building control there, I thought it would be okay anywhere else.
Can we turn up an email? This is CEP 3049719. If we can blow that up on the top half of that page. This is an email from Deborah French of Alcoa on the 13th of May 2013 to individuals at CEP, including Jeff Blades. Did you know Deborah French at Alcoa? Did you know her?
I've never spoken to her. And
What about Jeff Blades at CEP? Did you know him?
knew of him. I'm not sure that I ever spoke to him particularly.
Now, just to be clear, you're not copied into this email. I'm not saying you knew about this at the time, but what she says is, hi, you may be aware there have been some reports via the BBC concerning a fire on a building in UAE regarding ACM. As a business, we are aware of this report and our technical team are following the details. But in the meantime, I wanted to add some thoughts that may help if you get questions from your customers, clients, etc. Regarding the supply of Rainabond in the UK, as you know, we supply both PE and FR core and can control and understand what core is being used in all projects due to the controlled supply route we have. By only supplying Rainabond to a very small group of approved fabricators and working very closely with them on all projects, we are able to follow what type of project is being designed, developed, and then offer the right Rainabond specification, including the core. At this stage, we will continue to offer both PE and FR core and continue to the close working relationship we have with our approved fabricators to make sure the right technical support, etc., etc. Do you see that there?
Yes.
Now, were you ever made aware of this email or the substance of what's in this email?
No.
Were you aware of fires in the UAE involving ACM in or around May 2013?
No, I think the first time that I learnt about those was when I was doing the course at Bath.
Right. So you were never made aware before that of the contents of this email, i.e. that there were concerns in the industry arising out of these fires in 2013?
No.
Were you aware that Rainabond ACM could be supplied with either a PE or an FR core?
No, again, I think that was something I didn't learn about until I was at Bath.
So you weren't aware at the time of the Grenfell project that there was an FR core to the Rainabond
No.
fire retardant, fire resistant core?
Not that I can remember, no.
So you didn't ever have any discussions with anybody at Alcoa or CEP about whether a PE or FR core should be used on the Grenfell project?
No, I think I had virtually no communications with CEP or Alcoa.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's probably an appropriate moment because there's a little bit to go on this topic.
Right.
So I will need to ask this witness to come back tomorrow morning.
Well, you did indicate that. Can you give me some idea of how long you might require?
I would hope to be about an hour in the morning with him.
Right. Well, Mr. Anketell-Jones, I'm sorry that we've not been able to finish your evidence today, and I'm sure you would like to have got away, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to come back tomorrow for a few more questions. Judging by what Miss Grange has said, I think you can hope to get away between 11 and 11:30 if that affects your arrangements. But we're going to break now, so I'll ask you to be back here at 10 o'clock to start again in the morning. And please not to talk to anyone about your evidence over the break. All right?
Yes, sir.
Good. Thank you very much. Would you like to go with the usher then, please? Right, Miss Grange, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.